I'm Todd Bookspan, and welcome to your neighborhood real estate show. The hyperlocal real estate show where real estate professionals talk about the neighborhood you live in or the neighborhood you want to live in. This episode is brought to you by homebuyeruniversity.net, your free comprehensive guide to buying or refinancing your home. Click over to homebuyeruniversity.net to get started online today. Yep. Hey everyone, I'm Todd Bookspan and welcome to another episode of Your Neighborhood Real Estate Show. I am super excited to have Mindy Jones here with the Amy Jones Group.
Here I am.
Here you are.
Long time coming.
I know. I'm super excited. Because we had Amy Jones from the Amy Jones Group on when I did my radio show.
That's right. Same Amy Jones Group.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's been quite some time too.
And every once in a while, people like me call you Amy on accident.
It happens all the time, actually.
I have to imagine it does.
It does. It happens all the time, but how nice to leave a legacy, right? I mean, Amy worked really hard to build this team, and then I worked really hard to help her retire, and they're happy, and it's great. It's awesome.
I think it's awesome. I think anytime you can have a family business
That's right.
and doing something you love, that's great.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. And you actually know my mom too. That's just
I know. Should we give a plug for Susan?
Sure, we can. She's not going to listen.
She's not? Maybe if you tell her to listen.
Exactly. She got a plug. Hey, Mom, just listen to the first 5 minutes.
So I'm sure today's conversation will center around community because that is a big part of who I am.
Which I love.
And that's how I met your mom, was at Phoenix Children's Hospital.
All right. So before that, how did you get into real estate?
So Amy, my stepmom, she had a team in South Chandler. And I think I complained one day about traveling. I was doing a lot of traveling for work. And I think she made a joke, like if you were a real estate agent, you wouldn't have to travel for work. And I am one of those kinds of people that if you tell me there's something I could do that I don't know how to do it, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I'll just it sounds interesting. I'll get my real estate license and then maybe quit my job, whatever. Yeah, right. 6 weeks later, I quit my job. I got licensed. I joined the team and I had a lot of big ideas.
A lot of big ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to decide what the question I should ask you next is. All right.
It's your show.
Well, I know, but like a lot of big ideas. Like, so tell me
what does that mean?
So you were brand new in the business and you had big ideas. So what did you think you could do differently?
So first of all, I came into it thinking I could do it differently. And what I learned was that is a very corporate construct. Come in, fix it, change it, right? Without really understanding it. And so one of the greatest parts of being in this industry now 10 years is I've shaken off a lot of the things about what I learned, about what a leader had to look like, what your organization had to look like, that I all learned in the corporate space. Yeah. And I remember going to my first real estate training and I left and my dad, who was on the team at the time also, said, what did you think about, your first training? And I'm like, they couldn't figure out the projector. They didn't have the seat set up properly. I'm thinking like, who are these yahoos, right? And missed like the whole bigger picture. So it was a really big learning experience for me. And I'm so grateful it happened in the order that it did. But a lot of what I wanted to do right off of the bat was to put structure into place, put accountability and metrics. And right, I came from an IT industry. Yeah. I had been in the corporate sector for 12 years. And a lot of that stuff 10 years ago, it wasn't super commonplace. I mean, look at what you're still doing with Win by Noon. Like people don't all know how to run a business that way.
Right.
And in the space that I came into, it wasn't run that way at all. And I thought, is it broken? Because all I knew was the corporate side.
Right. Well, I think it's such a gift to have that experience because I feel like people see HGTV, they jump in and think it's going to be easy. And then, they treat it like a hobby and they get paid like a hobby. It's not really a career.
Totally. And there were a ton of benefits to coming in that way. At the time I had a basement home. I never changed the alarm clock. So I got up at the same time I had when I used to go to my corporate job. I took a shower. I got dressed in work clothes. And I went into my kitchen and I got my coffee and I even put it in a to-go cup, not a mug. And I walked downstairs and I had my office in my basement and I stayed down there until 5 o'clock. So I had that already ingrained in me and I'm so grateful for that. But I was a very inexperienced leader in the entrepreneurial space and came in and was like, this is how it works. I know this works. And it was true that would work. But change is hard for people.
Oh, it is.
And what I realized and learned, obviously, over time is that when you want to change something, even if you know it's right, and even if you have their best intentions at heart, it will be hard, and it will be too hard for some people. And that's not personal, but you have to learn how to navigate it. So I definitely would say that my first few years in real estate, obviously learning real estate and how to work with clients and all of that, I feel like I got that really quickly. It was all the leadership lessons that came over time.
Oh, I just love that. I just love that. I mean, you're singing to my heart of just what I believe is missing oftentimes in our industries in general. And so I love that piece. So before I go down that path and community building, all that, let's just talk kind of nuts and bolts real estate for a minute, because you run a team.
I do.
And you service the whole valley, but you really focus on the Southeast Valley.
That's right. So we have a lot of natives on our team, myself included. I was born and raised here in Central Phoenix, moved out to the Southeast Valley over the past decade. And we promote our business and foster community primarily in the Southeast Valley. So it's not even the East Valley in general. It's really focused on Chandler, Gilbert, Queen Creek, Mesa, Santan Valley, really that bottom, I call it like the elbow, only because I'm from here. And so the only thing I see on a map is the circle of the freeways.
Yes.
So for me, it's like that little bottom corner. And yeah, so that's where we've been. So Amy, when she started the business, she was in Sun Lakes and in South Chandler. So it kind of grew our way out of Sun Lakes as I built a business that looked like people like me, right? Moms with kids of all different ages. And then we kind of went where the growth was. So we moved up into Chandler and then moved our way east into Gilbert and now focus really on that whole Southeast Valley.
And it's just such a great part of the valley. So someone who's listening to this from out of state,
or
doesn't know the Southeast Valley, like my mom, just in case she listens to this far.
Yes.
What would you say? What excited you? You moved from where I love, where I grew up in Phoenix, and you moved out there. So talk about that.
I always use my personal example when I talk about it. The whole valley in general has something for everybody. And I think that's what I love about Arizona is there are so many different options for people here, and it's all very accessible by freeway. So you could live in any part of the valley and access things in other parts of the valley. What I grew to really love about the Southeast Valley was access to parks and outdoor activities. So Chandler has like a park every per capita 1 mile. And so there are parks everywhere. Every neighborhood has them. Gilbert and Queen Creek have done a really good job of building new parks using new technologies with facilities, right? Things that families are looking for when they're looking in outdoor recreation opportunities. There's an entire employment sector down there. So obviously being from Phoenix, people would come traditionally into Phoenix for employment, right? You'd have all your banks and your law firms and everything kind of centered around downtown Phoenix. Then you had what happened up in North Scottsdale, and that really became like the tech corridor. So you would have a lot of IT companies move up there. And then down in South Chandler, we obviously have Intel as kind of our core business. And then that's really grown from there. And so you've got healthcare based in the Southeast Valley. You got tech that moved from Scottsdale because the prices were too high for not only for corporate space, but also for housing, came and moved into the Southeast Valley. So you have the Price Corridor, which is your Intel, Orbital, eBay, Northrop Grumman, I should say, all of those companies, Wells Fargo down there. And so for me, it was really great employment, really active governments, really active chambers of commerce, good outdoor activities for families. I always tell people when they move from out of state to check the city websites because they'll get a feel for what the city is interested in promoting. So especially as a real estate agent, obviously I can't guide somebody to one area or another because I have to find out from them what's important. But one way that I can really help them is to look at the city websites and the chamber websites. So for example, when you look at Queen Creek's websites, there's kids and splash pads all over the front. So you can draw your own conclusion, right, about what kind of people or audiences they're really trying to attract. And therefore, those are the things that they're going to pour their money into, to developing, to supporting, to providing community around, right? And so I think that's a really good resource. And if you look at everything centered around the Southeast Valley, it's very much about supporting businesses, big and small, creating families, providing opportunities for them to do things and activities. And I find it coming from what I would call a big city, Phoenix, I find the Southeast Valley much easier to navigate So to me, it still feels smaller, right, than a Phoenix platform does.
And I know you said that there's you enjoy the new construction that's going on out there as well. So it's also continuing to grow out there versus someone who doesn't necessarily want to buy, as my friends in the new home world call a used home. I just call it a resale home.
That's right, a resale home.
But new home, there's growing out there.
Yeah, and that's not anything that I grew up with. So I'm from Central Phoenix originally. I have lived in homes. I lived in Coronado, and my house was built in 1921. So, I mean, I've lived in homes of all different ages, but certainly nothing newer than probably like 1980, right? And then moved to the Southeast Valley, and I had a garage for the very first time. I mean, it just was like a whole new world. And in some ways, I had to transition myself into that. It was very different culturally in a neighborhood to, of houses that look like that. And then I started to feel like everything just felt really easy and convenient, right? And, big parking lots and stores and things were just very accessible. And so new construction out there is also very accessible. Obviously, over the last couple of years during the pandemic, it became less of an option for our clients. Everything was waitlisted and lotteried, and not that it wasn't worth it, but it was just hard to get.
Hard to get in a long wait once you got on the
That's
list.
right. And a lot of people would keep looking at resale in the meantime and ultimately ended up pulling off the list because they would find something. So now we have the option. There's a lot of incentives for them to buy in the new communities. I think our prices have gone up quite a bit over the last couple of years. And sometimes it's easier for a buyer to swallow the purchase of a new home at that price versus a resale home at that price. And so I think it is a really good option for people.
And what are your thoughts? The market's a different market this year, right? Here in the first quarter Q1. And so, certainly I think people are still scared of the market. They're scared of where it was, that it was just, offer, like you said, wait list. And then, now you can actually buy a house.
It's a very accessible market, especially if you've lived through the last couple of years. I think in the industry that there are 3 different kinds of agents. And I would say that this, spills over into 3 different kinds of consumers, really depending on when they bought and sold last. But I think there's the agents who existed during the market crash. And I think for them, the pandemic was very difficult for them. They were the last ones who would agree to or promote paying over appraised value because they knew what happened the last time. And so even though the data was very different in those 2 different time periods, they just couldn't get behind it because they had such PTSD from what happened. Right. Then you had the agents like myself who were licensed after the crash, but before the pandemic. And for us, the time that we spent for the majority of our career was a balanced, if not a seller's market. And so we came into the pandemic like, oh, this is weird. It also feels like it's a very finite amount of time. So let's take advantage of it in every way that we can because we know it's not going to be here very long, but we weren't afraid that the outcome would look like something we had experienced before because we knew the differences logically and we didn't have the heart problem to deal with, right? And then you have like the third piece of people who were licensed during the pandemic. And again, this is also over to buyers or sellers. This is all they knew. All they knew was a fast-paced market. Right. They started to equate the pace of the market with the health of the market, which are not the same things. And so then as we started to come out of that and return to balance and to healthy, they had like the wind knocked out of their sails and the fear mindset and the scarcity mindset really started to set in. And I think that they're really the ones that are struggling the most in our current environment. Because when they look at the trends of the graphs, they're only looking back 2, 3, 4 years. And so everything we're looking at is much lower, right? Or dramatically different than what you see. Whereas if you pull the graph back even 10 years, you see that what we're in now is extremely healthy, very sustainable, very normal. And with such a low inventory market, they're not going to feel that pace, but we are in fact in a seller's market.
Yeah, so I love that you point out that we're in fact in a seller's market.
Yeah.
People are still surprised to hear that, but there's just not a lot of inventory and there's actually a lot of pent up demand.
Yeah, I mean, we only have about 15,000 homes that are available on the market right now. You figure that's down from about 20,000 just a quarter ago. And we're certainly not going to feel the same type of frenzy that we had when we had 2,500 or 4,000 homes that we had on the market. We also don't have 110% of demand. So when you take a look at the two sets of numbers and you compare even now to the middle of the pandemic, for example, so you say there's two examples of sellers markets, right? Now in the middle of the pandemic. Then buyer demand was at about 110%. Today, it's about 60%, right? And then you look at inventory, then it was about 14% of what was normal. And now we're at about like 50% or 60%, depending on the area, right? So we still don't have enough houses for the demand. But as a seller, you may not have 500 people that come through your home on a week, and you may not have multiple offers. What's happening in this type of a seller's market is what is normal, which is if there's more than one offer on the table for the house, it's going to get competitive. If there's one offer on the table for the house, you're going to negotiate, right? People think that a seller's market means there's no negotiation. That is an idea bred out of only the last 2 years. This market is very similar to the market that I got into 10 years ago, which homes were selling in a decent amount of time, maybe 60 to 90 days. Buyers could also negotiate, maybe, $10,000 off a sub $500,000 house or get a home warranty and a couple of other things. That was all very normal. I think the last couple of years have skewed what people think is normal. And the problem with that is the consumer sentiment piece. And that's if we're not educating the consumer, you're literally going up against what I would call this mountain on the graph of abnormal behavior over the last couple of years.
Well, I love you point out consumer behavior. So I think the consumer, they're oftentimes confused. And then you just labeled that there's 3 different types of agents. So what advice would you give to the consumer when they call a realtor what should they ask to make sure, hey, who am I dealing with? Is this someone who's equipped to help me in today's market?
Yeah, I mean, I would ask the same questions that I recommend that my agents ask the client about their experience, because understanding a client's experience will help our agents guide them better, right? I think that we have a tendency to want to just solve or fix problems or throw data at people without ever understanding from them where they're coming from, right? So if we don't come from a place of curiosity, we don't ask questions that could give us obvious information that would help us better help them. And so the questions that I tell them to ask the consumer is, when was the last time you bought or sold a house? Right? So from the consumer would be back the same, right? When was the last time you bought or sold houses? When did you get licensed? What types of markets have you worked in, right? Like what is your experience with sort of question. So I'm an exactly what to say certified guide. And a lot of the conversation that we have with people is about trying to understand where they're coming from, right? There's more than one book methodology, like this is by Phil M. Jones, but there's so many different methodologies that are all about coming from a place of curiosity in order to build true empathy, to be able to walk in someone's shoes and understand where they're coming from, so that you have the space and the authorization to ask questions about what you can do to help them. And so I would encourage that same action to be taken by consumers asking real estate agents. What's their experience with? What do they know about? How do they feel about, right? And really understanding where they're coming from.
Yeah, I think curiosity is something that's missing a lot in this world.
Yeah, I mean, we just kind of jump in to fix. And especially agents who have only been licensed the last couple of years, they're really used to being very reactionary because the market didn't allow any space for them to be anything other than that. And so they just had to jump and quick and result, right? It was very fast paced. When you have time and space is when you can actually have these conversations so that you're sure that you're providing help and solutions for people and they have time to actually think about it.
Yeah, I like that, help and solution. So if an agent's listening to this and they said, gosh, you know what, I think maybe I'm that agent who needs that help. I know you do coaching and I know that, obviously you have a team. So talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, your environment absolutely matters. I mean, I think any good organization will talk about that. They'll talk about how their infrastructure, their support model, their accountability, their support is all going to help somebody thrive. And when agents are out there, they have to be really honest with themselves about what they need to thrive. Most times, I think people either know what they need, but are afraid to get it, or are afraid to be held accountable for it, or they aren't introspective enough to know what it is that they need. So they go out and they ask the same, set of questions. Do you provide leads? Do you provide this? Whatever it is, when they're going to look for a new environment, when in reality, what they should be asking is, what is it that I need in order to get to my goals? And then, can you provide the community and the structure that's the right fit for me? Because everyone needs something different. Like I shared with you how I worked in my basement. I've always had an office since then outside of the home. That was the best I could do in I had a bi-level then and haven't had a single level ever since. I have always paid for an office. And so if an agent tells me they have trouble focusing or, navigating working from home or whatever, it's like, okay, what are you doing to fix that? Are you joining a team or an organization that has office space? Are you setting aside money in your operating budget? Because everyone's operating a business. It doesn't matter if you're on a team or you're by yourself, you are operating a business. Are you setting aside operating income to rent a small drop-in space at a, big corporate office so that you have space? Like agents have to really look inside of themselves and say, here's the goal that I want to achieve. Here are the barriers that I have to getting there, which takes honesty. And then I'm going to seek out partners who will help me get there. And they need to start to perceive accountability as something other than someone trying to put their thumb on them. I have better things to do than put my thumb on people. But what I have is 14 people on my team who've told me that they have really big goals. And so my job is to help them get there. And so one of the things I started asking them recently is, do you want good cop or bad cop? Because I need to know when I show up for you, what is it that you want from me? Is today a day you want me to push you? Because I never let that part out of my head. But what I struggle with is sometimes that isn't what you need that day, and I don't know that.
Right.
So now I try to ask that question, because if I don't ask that question, my tendency is to push, because that's what you've told me that you want. And then if I don't support you in that, I feel a sense of responsibility for that. Obviously, you have to do the work. I can't do that for you. But if I told you come here and you'll be successful, and then I don't show up for you in that way, right? So I really think accountability is what most agents struggle with. And I think it's because they don't know what they need, or they're not honest with themselves about what they need.
That's super powerful. Well, I always joke, everyone needs accountability, but no one wants it, right? I mean, that's just, all day I could talk about that. But
yeah. And many people pay for it. It can come in a million ways, right?
Right.
It can be a class. Like you go to a class at the gym to make sure that you go to the gym.
Right.
It can be a class. It can be a coach. It can be your family. It can be someone, threatening to shave your head if you don't do your numbers. It could be the opposite of that. But you have to know what's going to work for you and then seek it out so that it doesn't feel like someone has their finger on you, but it feels like they're really like your biggest cheerleader.
I just love that.
Thanks.
I just love that. All right, if I'm a realtor, I'm joining your team.
Come on. Oh, yeah. We're 14 women.
If I'm a realtor, I'm joining your team. All right. I just love that. I think, everything that you're saying is what I believe in leadership and what I think it should look like. And I do believe that everyone needs some type of accountability. So you named all the things, and I'm not going to rename them, but I thought that's awesome. And it continues to go back to the word that you used before, community, right? I know you're all about community, and I know it's not just community of your team and not just, for you, it's a lot bigger. So let's talk about that.
Well, I don't know how far back you want to go, but when I was in second grade, I started a peer mediation group.
Okay.
So
how much time do you have? You can start there.
No, I'll skip from there and I'll move way forward. But I just used that story.
A peer mediation group. I didn't know what peer mediation was when I was in second grade.
I know. Someone asked me, is that really what I called it back then? And that is my recollection. It could be wrong, but I don't know what else I would have called it. So I feel like, yes, I called it a peer mediation group. I trained kids in my class how to resolve problems on the playground. I made them matching puffy paint shirts, and I posted them on the playground in different corners and told the other kids in the class that if they had a problem on the playground, they should come try to find one of us at each the corner, and we would help them resolve whatever that looked like. Dang. Community has always been my coping mechanism. It's how I've learned to navigate to another stage in my life. It seems to make sense to my brain that if I don't know how to do something, I should find other people that are doing it and get around them. I believe that humans have been around for a very long time and that most thoughts are not original thought. Most things people have thought of in some capacity. They will look different, sound different, feel different, depending on the person who thinks of the thought. But the core functions of how people work has been around for a really long time. And so when I want to do something new or see something new or fit in or whatever it is, I assume there are other people out there who feel like me. And so that is how I build. And that is how I got into the community work that I did before at Phoenix Children's Hospital and with Make a Difference and Hands on Greater Phoenix. That is how I've started programs and clubs and newspapers. And in all times of my life, there's always been a community aspect. And one thing that I've learned now as an adult is that the things that I seek most or that I am lacking most, I am really good about creating for others because I'm truly coming from the most purest place of understanding what it could feel like if you had that. And so it's evolved with me over time as I've evolved. Same with my team, right? When I started my team, I didn't have kids. I wasn't married. I was in a very different place in my life. And I've used my team and the development of the community around me to curate my world. And community in turn has returned as a massive part of that. So we've built our business based on community. We are engaged in a lot of community organizations. We've never done pay-per-click. We've built relationships, and off of those relationships have talked about other ways that we serve. We've changed all of our messaging, and this is over time, right? It's not like one day I want to build a community. This is just becoming more authentic to myself, focused on the language that we use and the way that we market our team and the way that we talk to people and where we spend our money and where we donate our time. And we do quarterly volunteer events as a team. We donate quite a bit of money and time, not only from our team, but we engage our clients in doing that. We build relationships. I'm on boards and committees. I run the Women Empowered Committee at the Gilbert Chamber of Commerce. I co-chaired the gala for ICANN last year. And as my clarity around who I wanted to serve surfaced, I felt inside of me that I was called to create a nonprofit to give that a home. Having a background in nonprofit, I never thought I would create one because I think there's a lot of duplication of services out there. And had I not had a business where I was literally trying to bring nonprofit CEOs onto my Monday market update just because I wanted a platform to be able to talk about it and it didn't fit, I probably wouldn't have created it. But last year I created Community on Purpose, and it has 3 legs. And the first is to support women in leadership and business. So we do a quarterly Women in Leadership breakfast. So we do those 4 times a year. We support nonprofit organizations that have established themselves to give a voice to women in both leadership and education opportunities. So we work with Positive Paths in the East Valley and also Amplify Voices in the East Valley as well. And then the second piece is to support organizations that support youth and families. So last year we donated to 12 organizations in the East Valley that support youth and families. Obviously, my time at Phoenix Children's Hospital was one of the most fulfilling. I've never felt the way that I did roaming those hospital floors at night. I loved everything about being there, and I love everything about that organization. And now I have the ability to serve many more who serve kids in a lot of different ways. And then the third piece is direct giving. So as real estate agents, we're often the first people to find out that people need stuff, right? They call us in to sell their house, and we go in and it's like, oh, there's a much bigger problem here. So we have a grant application process on our website. And so we've given grants to, there's a family in Chandler who the wife has cancer. They actually had hospice just called in this week. She's been a long time past client of ours and a family we're very close to. We've given a donation to that family. It obviously doesn't fix the problem, but we like to show that we are thinking about them. And we know very strongly that we would not have a business without the people that we serve. We gave a grant to a family whose house caught on fire. And so obviously couldn't fix that situation either, but gave them a grant for the media incidentals for them as they had to move out of the house and, some things like that. So those are the three main pieces of that organization. It's really just a home for me to shove all of my community work into and to allow me the space to get more people involved in the work that we do.
I just love it. I think community is so important. And I think that what I love hearing you say is that I just always know that can help me get to where I'm trying to go. And if you can't find it, you're going to create it.
100%.
And so if someone wanted to support your organization, how would they find out more and be able to help?
So we have a website called communityonpurpose.com. And we also are on Instagram under the same. I think on Instagram it's Community on Purpose AZ. And then I also have a podcast called Community on Purpose. So last year I launched the podcast. I think we have like maybe 50 episodes. I've done it almost every week since we launched it.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Thank you. I planned to do it every 2 weeks, and then it was like, why not? Let's make it every week. So I have missed a couple, but I would say it's about 50 episodes now. And it's conversations with women who are intentionally creating community through business, giving, or living, because we know that can look a variety of different ways. And so the conversations really allow me a space to talk about my love for community, to show people how differently it can be done, that it doesn't have to look one way, and that there's a lot of messages and learning opportunities and insight that you can get into talking to other leaders in a community space. Every woman who comes on the show, almost every woman who comes on the show, I think they ask me like, am I qualified to be here? Am I even qualified to be here? Right? They say that to me every time. And I'm like, yes, you are more than qualified to be here. But through their just storytelling of their experience, I'm able to extract kind of those key messages so that people who are listening, even if they're not passionate about the interest area that the person may be passionate about, if there's some sense of community that they want to build or be a part of, they can kind of extract some of those messages.
I mean, you're just helping impact and empower other people.
Yeah.
And so is there time that people could commit to volunteer and help and stuff that you're doing, or is it really just financial support you need, or both?
Yeah. So what we're doing on the volunteer side as well. So I have a background in volunteer management also. And so it's really near and dear to my heart that we create opportunities for people. Right now, we're just doing those 4 volunteer events a year. And so when people reach out and say, hey, I want to volunteer, we tell them that they can plug into that. The other thing that I try to do is be just a connector in that space. Obviously, I'm running this on top of my real estate business and my staff. God bless them. They have now gained a whole separate second company that they're working for, and I have to be cognizant of that because I am like an overflowing idea jar. And I also have a toddler at home. So I am not the one to implement all of my ideas anymore. So I have to be very cognizant of not running my staff into the ground either.
Yes. Adam might say I'm a overflowing jar of ideas. I'm going to write that
There's
down.
other ways they would describe that. That's probably the nicest one.
Nice. Well, I mean, I think if people listening don't realize you're a force of nature, and the fact that you not just talk about what you're passionate about, but you act and do great things with it, I don't know what they missed.
Thank you.
That was just awesome. So we covered a lot.
Yeah.
And is there anything that we didn't cover that you were hoping that I would ask you, or that you wanted to make sure you mentioned?
I mean, I talked about how much I love Arizona. I guess I could just leave you with my 2 favorite quotes.
Let's do that.
Is that good?
That would be great.
So I really believe in the quote, be the change that you want to see. I know that, it may be overused or people have heard it, but I honestly believe that. And then my second one is every connection truly is the opportunity to change the world. Yeah. And I really live that way. I really believe that I am not in charge, but my job here is to just open doors and keep opening them. And I don't know what's on the other side, but I know if I keep opening them and keep building relationships and keep connecting people, that magic will happen. I've seen it happen. I've seen the magic of community, and I am motivated to continue doing that and to teach my 3.5-year-old son why it's so important to live that way. It's not about money. It's not even about time. You don't have to have those things to make an impact. It's about having an open heart and an open mind, that you can't just let someone walk by you and not try to make a connection. And I think the way that I've seen in my life that show up is that if you have your eyes open, there will be enough of these things that happen along the way that cannot be coincidence. That for me is like, okay, when I turned left, I was supposed to turn left. Or when I turned right, I was supposed to turn right. Like I don't know necessarily where it will end up. I don't know exactly where I'm headed, but that was the nod that was like, yep, if you wouldn't have been here at that exact time, that wouldn't have happened. And so I just keep looking for those signs.
Awesome. All right. So we've given out some websites along the way. I'll make sure to get them in the show notes. If someone really did want to reach out, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah. So our team line is 480-250-3857. If you call by phone, that's the best way. Our socials are super accessible. So on Instagram and on Facebook, mine is Mindy Jones, but the Amy Jones group is on both of them. So we're super available to people.
Awesome. Well, that was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by homebuyeruniversity.net, your free comprehensive guide to buying or refinancing your home. Click over to homebuyeruniversity.net to get started online today.